everyone. Welcome back to the Ask the Educator podcast. This is your host, Kevin Anderson, and with me, as you can see, I have some guests. Go ahead, guys.
I'm the co-host, Adam Okada, Clinical Education Specialist.
Stefan Kovac, Educator Emeritus, Healthmark Industries.
Malinda Elamari, Clinical Education Specialist for Healthmark Industries.
Excellent. So for this episode, we wanted to do something a little bit different. This is our 100th episode.
All right.
Over the course of several years now, right?
Wait, does that mean we get cake?
Okay. That's a very good idea, but unless you bought it, yeah. But that being said, guys, I just wanted to kind of do a look back on the podcast itself. I wanted to make sure and bring some heightened awareness to the fact that, hey, we've been around a little while now. It's not like we just started the podcast. So if there are people out there who may be just now finding out about the podcast, we can kind of go over some of the highlights and things like that we've covered, some of the topics, maybe what makes us different, that kind of thing. And then maybe draw some more attention to some of the episodes that people might be interested that we've done in the past. So starting off, why don't we just touch on, why did we start the podcast in the first place? And we can just kind of go around.
Adam?
I mean, the one thing I love about the Ask the Educator podcast is it's educational. And we talk about educational topics, and there's a lot of podcasts out there about the industry, but I love that there's one that people can have for just education. If they want to learn something, they want to go deeper into a topic, I feel like that's what this podcast is all about.
I agree with you. We don't offer CEUs. We try to bring topics and people who have researched or know that topic, and we look at it differently. And we do know that podcasts, you don't have the interaction as if you're in a real live setting in a meeting, but we're trying to bring topics of interest, and that's what's really, I think, sets us apart.
I think for me too, the thing that I love about, us starting this podcast and being a part of it is we're closing the loop for the education styles that are out there, right? People learn, some are auditory learners, some are visual, and some learn better by reading. I am not that person. And so, I think that just gives somebody this, a half an hour quick education, like I can listen to this quick on my ride to work. I learned something, and I can bring that in and teach the other people in my job or help educate some more people in my field.
Yeah, I love the part that you mentioned about, listen to it on the commute. That's definitely a place where I tend to listen to podcasts is when I'm commuting to work or some other facility for work. But that being said, one of the things that I definitely should bring up is that we kind of started this podcast, even though it was in the works for a while, I suppose, in terms of an idea. But the pandemic definitely forced our hand a little bit in that, we all of a sudden were not able to do the in-person education that we were so, big into at the time. The chapter meetings were huge. Mm-hmm. I remember the first one I went to when I was hired by Healthmark was CCSA, and there was over 100 people there. I haven't been to one with over 100 people since then.
Yeah.
So these, virtual platforms or the podcast type platforms have been really good for that. And, when the pandemic really hit hard, that was just an obvious avenue to get some, quality education into the masses. The thing that's great about podcasts is you can basically listen to them on any platform you choose, at any time you choose, all of those things. So that's definitely one of the big ones in terms of the why for me.
Yeah, and over the last, it's 3.5 years now we've been doing the podcast, so not as long as you've been the original, but a lot of topics that we've covered over that 3.5 years. So I'm going to start with you, but what are some of those things that are highlights and things that we've covered that you are memorable or maybe memorable guests, things like that?
Yeah, great question, Adam. As we kind of go over some of these older topics and even some of the guests that we mentioned, I want to make sure that everyone out there who has been a guest, we appreciate you. There's no way I can remember or name every single one of you, so please don't take offense to me forgetting or leaving you out of this conversation. But one that definitely stands out to me was kind of early on, and that was actually with you, Adam, before you were a Healthmark employee, and we also had Harry Alsorin from the WFHSS on that. Stefan, you introduced him, and he was a great guest to have on along with Adam.
That was memorable for me as well because he was hard to keep up with. He definitely knows his stuff.
And I think that's what podcasting has allowed all of us to do. Is it's easy to bring people from somewhere else and talk about a topic, and that is what is really important, is trying to understand what we need to talk about and not just come up with whatever, but people who research and know what they're doing. And that's, I think, what sets us apart. And you said it, COVID pushed us to do something, because Healthmark has been known as providing free speakers, going in and doing all-day programs or partial programs, or doing a lot of things. And we needed to find our own way. And I do want to give the people at Beyond Clean a shout out. They were doing this before everybody else, and they showed that there is a way to get information to people all around the world. So I want to say to Hank and those guys, way to go. You've shown us the importance of a podcast, and everybody who's doing it is finding their own way that they think is the best way to serve the industry. And this is how we're doing it, you know? That's, everybody's different. So you got that smorgasbord, like you were saying, people learn differently in audio and so on from there. And we would not be remiss without saying that.
It seems like everybody's got, you know, like to your point, their own niche in the podcast industry lately, of like ARN, you know, AST, you know, and everybody's pulling in and trying to give information in tidbit formats to help people grasp that information, you know, or making a platform where people can just listen to, you know, whoever. We have so many different podcasts out there, you know, murder mystery podcast, you know, and it's so much beyond, you know, what your likes are and stuff. So I think just what we're trying to do in the industry, to Stefan's point of educate and help bring that to this industry, is amazing.
I want to say one quick thing, because Malinda does some podcasts with the packaging. She loves packaging and sterile barriers, right? That is one of your passion. That's what's great.
Absolutely.
All of us here at Healthmark, we all bring different expertise together, and she knows different people, but she's been on other companies' podcasts. We've all been Beyond Clean. We've been on other ones. So it's, how do we make sure we're getting you what you need to talk about? And like, we've had Nancy Chobin, we've had so many other different people out there, and also we had Jill, the IP from Emory, and we've had a whole lot of other people to come talk about. And you said at the beginning of COVID, remember we had some people talking about how they were redoing masks from the University of Michigan, remember? So if you think back and you want to go and listen to these, this is a plug. Subscribe, hit subscribe. No, I'm sorry.
Share with your friends.
Share with your friends. No, go ahead.
But it's true that actually there is truth in that, because I think back to when I was managing a department, and the way I learned about insulation testing was literally a sales rep walked in on a cold call one day, and I happened to open the door and was there and listened to what they had to say about insulation testing. And now if you think about it, I, before that time, had not heard of insulation testing. We were not performing that step at all. In fact, the only insulation tester in our department was in my office, and I didn't even know it.
Ooh.
Right?
Nice.
Yeah, so the reason I say that is because we can have better reach with a podcast, and in the sense that if we don't have to rely on people physically going around to building to teach these valuable things, and we can simply put it on a podcast, the hope is that people will hear it, learn it wherever they are, and be able to put in meaningful, patient-friendly or patient safety practices into place without having to wait in some sort of corner of the world where they don't get the information. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I came from the OR, so I didn't just come with that knowledge that, hey, we need to perform this vital insulation testing step, which I bring that up for obvious reasons. One, it was impactful in my own career, but we also covered it very, very much in the podcast. There were ST79 updates, amendments that spoke very specifically to insulation testing, and it's something we're all very passionate about. And you can find up-to-date information in the podcast on that.
And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
I was just going to say, and to your point, we've heard so much in the industry about insulation testing, right? With the new amendment coming out, highlighting the importance of insulation testing, us talking about it, all these different podcasts out there, but yet people might say, well, why do we still need information on this? Why do we still need a podcast about this? Because we still go into facilities and it's not being done. So it does sound like, and I will admit, listening to different podcasts, it's like, oh, insulation testing, this is repetitive. Oh, flexible scopes, this is repetitive. However, that information is not really being disseminated enough to reach those people who really need to hear it. And we got to remember, like, most of the people who are sitting here listening to our podcasts and stuff, they are on another level of,
Engagement.
want and desire and that earning to learn. So, we need it to reach and spread to other people and that information to be spread.
Adam, you've been on the forefront in using, again, I'm old, mass media or the internet for education.
Sure.
Before you came to work with us, you were doing it on your own and still have teaching. Well, how do you see all this working out and helping the industry and the technician? Because, there's two levels, technician and managers, but what have you seen the change in the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? You've been in here 20 some years. You've been in it almost 20. You're over 30, and I'm not going to say how many, but you've seen it. Tell us how it impacts.
I think that what's happened in the industry is the same people that were going to the conferences before, the same people that would show up in person and go to those in-person events are the same people that seek out the information online. So those same people that want to learn and are passionate about learning and want to do better for the patients, they're still the ones that are going out and looking for that stuff. What we need to get is into places that are not looking for it. They don't even know that there's a gap in their knowledge. And I think that's what's difficult about it. So it's on all of us really to share and disseminate this information to everybody, as many people as we can. I think that's why we're so passionate here at Healthmark, is that we really just want to get this message to as many people as possible in as many different avenues as we can create, whether it's YouTube or the podcast or going out in person and going all over the country to speak. It's really just, we need to get that message of education out, and we're still behind. It's still not where we need to be.
And I'm old school, so I'm used to in front of people, and then they can ask you questions. And I'm real old school. For those of you who don't know, Dan Mayworm in the Journal of Materials Management, in the back last page, if you go find some from the 1980s, and I have some and I can show you, and I've showed it to you, Kevin, there was the last page, and you would write your question and you would put your address of where you wanted somebody to send you the information. That's really what was going on, 35 or more years ago. And now, we can get to people, and that's what's changing. But that one-on-one, even though this is great, I believe the networking is what's being lost. And is there a way we can do a better job, or how do we, you were saying, what do we do, Kevin or Malinda or whatever?
I think, and to your point, that's a great point, that as amazing as a podcast is and as amazing as our webinars are, there is definitely something lacking with that. Being in person, meeting your fellow co-workers outside of the department, meeting people from different areas, getting involved in your chapters and stuff like that. All of that just adds, and it's a networking concept that you never know when your next job or your promotion will come from, or who you're even talking to in those different arenas. Yeah. And so those lead to different opportunities for you. And I think we need to find a way to make an even playing field of going to webinars, having those kind of things, using podcasts, but not forgetting the importance of being next to each other and saying, hi, Stefan, my name is Malinda. I'm amazing, if you didn't know. And so just getting our names out there and being able to do that, I think it's severely lacking. We have great platforms, right? We have the other platforms for webinars where you can like go into rooms and talk to each other. And once again, those are fantastic for different events and bring people, like we can pull people from other countries and stuff. And that's crazy to me, I mean, technology-wise. But I think we need to remember that we need to create a balance of that.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like the accessibility that is second to none, like now with podcasts and webinars and all that, reaching the far ends of the world all, through a stream or whatever, those are great, but they also kind of, a little bit take the legs out of the in-person meetings, which is where you can convert somebody like former Kevin, who really didn't care about attending a weekend educational event or whatever. I didn't feel like I needed this stuff, right? But eventually, I don't even know what, circumstance triggered this, but eventually I realized the tremendous value in all of this stuff. I think it was because I went to a AORN conference as a manager. It was a small chapter conference, and I learned something very valuable for sterile processing management, which was the OR case cart audit. And we were able to make major quality strides. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we haven't done these things forever and throughout my whole career. So it's like, hopefully we can use these to kind of, again, bolster the attendance at the in-person meetings and kind of build that up both for networking and educational purposes.
I have bookends here, and I'm going to say Healthmark is very lucky. I have the president of the North Carolina group, and I have the president of the Central California my mind's going blank, but here are two people that are presidents who are trying to get people to come to these meetings and to interact. But I'm going to go back, for me, when I first started in Michigan, we had 4 different groups, and one was the Greater Detroit. We met 8 to 10 months every year and had an annual meeting. But every month you'd go to a different hospital, you do a potluck, you present something, and you get a CEU, but then you got to tour a department and talk to people. That's being lost. We have groups failing now. There are chapters that are failing, and we have some presidents who are 4 or 5 years, they can't get anybody to run. And it's very disheartening that people don't see the value of going to an in-person meeting. Plus, they're listening to us here, but we're not giving you CEUs. But how do we, like you say, how do we tie in to have the people still listen and watch all this stuff, but still go to in-person,
I think you got to get people to take the initiative, take that next step, right? So it's great if you want to learn. It's great if you're getting to listen to the podcast. It's great if you're doing the webinars and all these things, but you have to be able to take that into action and put it in your own departments and to take it into chapters. Start a local chapter if you don't have one. Those are things that we can do as technicians or leaders in the industry, is take this information we have and start sharing it in person like that. So the podcast is, and I love our podcast. I mean, it is.
We're not partial at all.
No.
But and I love that it's about education because, again, the way this gets spread is through as many avenues as possible. But it's until people take that next step and say, you know what, I'm fired up. I want to start doing something. I'm going to go start a chapter. I'm going to join my chapter and try to make some positive changes within that chapter, get some more people into meetings and start recruiting people, get them fired up too. It's only going to happen if we all take that initiative to fire others up.
Before you speak, I forgot we have one other person who's not with us. Sharon's president of the...
That's right.
PWSP.
Yeah,
now,
whatever,
yes.
the Pacific West...
Yes.
Whatever, great group out there. I'm just a little, adult ADD. No, go ahead, Malinda, you were going to say something.
I was?
Oh,
No,
I
I'm just
thought-
kidding. No. I think, to your point, getting people involved in the chapters and getting them not just involved, but wanting to be a part of the growth of that chapter, right? For me, I see stuff like your podcast as your appetizer. You're just okay, here's a little taste of what you could get when you go to conferences to listen to speakers, right? Now we're talking about our full meal here. I don't know what is up with me and food. Anyway, but you know, our full meal here, and then on top of that, you get the dessert of asking questions and having that instant answers to your questions, being able to talk to people. You know, so when you're at these meetings and stuff, you have all these resources right there. It's not, okay, I'm going to send out an email and wait for a response and that kind of stuff. It's so nice to have that ability to be able to just have a conversation. And plus, sometimes we know when you send emails or your, text messages, you can't get it all across as having a conversation right now.
The other good point that making about in-person events is I met Stefan at an in-person seminar. I mean, that's literally where I met him. So, I mean, you make connections with people that then help you out later in your career. So it's important.
Well, that's very nice, but I have to tell you, it wasn't me. It was also Mr. Rowe. Hey, you doing, Sharon? But we went and had a drink.
We did.
We had something to eat.
Water.
Yeah, water. And what did we do? We convinced you to start looking for that part of California, this Central Valley, am I saying?
Yep.
It was lost in the bigger group and people weren't getting. I think we had 50 or 60 people that one time. It was the first time. Adam did his amazing things with the emails or whatever. And that chapter is still going strong now because people need it. And now we're able to go back in person, and we hope, I like the appetite are these things, but now start getting active and involved, I think that's real important.
It's kind of funny because we're talking about, where's the, the historical standpoint of the industry, and then we talk about how we had to pivot and then make everything accessible during the pandemic, which was an absolutely must-have. But then at the same time, when you think about going forward, we're all saying, we need to get back in person again. The value of getting back in person and doing everything
Comes full circle.
it goes full circle, exactly.
Oh.
And it's true though. Every single time I go to an in-person meeting, whether it's the big conference and expo or the smaller chapter meetings, and sometimes, to be honest, the smaller chapter meetings, it's almost easier to make newer connections and with people there. They come up, we have questions and what have you, but exchange contacts, and then sometimes you kind of reach out back and forth with different questions, and you start a relationship, which we're kind of getting really bad at that. We have to get back to getting good at those things so we can help raise the industry up, I feel.
Yeah, I want to throw a curveball at my three fellow people here based on this.
Yeah.
This is not a plug, but I want you to listen to this. What we are seeing and being asked as a company on these larger groups, in-person meetings, is to do hands-on. People want to touch and feel and do things. We've done all this remote stuff. We've shown pictures on the podcast, clean the brush this way, do this, and look at the washer and the stair, all that kind of stuff. But are we not getting requests to, can you do some hands-on? How do I touch this? What do I do? Do we not feel that one thing's led to this, and you're saying we're coming back full circle, we get more people. How do we do hands-on, Is that what you're also feeling?
I think to your point, yeah, I feel like there's a yearning out there for, as a society and as a whole in our industry, to not just sit there and listen, right? We don't, they don't want to just sit there and listen to somebody reading slides. They're I can do this anytime on my own. They want the explanation behind things, right?
Yeah.
There's more of a desire and more of a, learning the whys has become more out there of importance, right? Before it wasn't very important. It was just do this because Stefan said to do this. End of story.
Wow.
All right?
Thanks.
And that's it. You're
CPD guy said, yeah.
But now, they're people are questioning and they
right,
want the
Amy.
whys. And so when they're at these events, it's, I can touch this and ask questions. Why does this go in here? Why do I have to do it this way? But I think not just that, but just doing hands-on activities in
Puts it all
general
together.
that, you know, maybe it's just an activity to bring home the presentation you're trying to do. But it gets people out of their seats. It makes them engage and interact. When a lot of times they'll just come to something and just say, oh, I know Stefan, I'm going to sit next to him. I'm not sitting next to Adam. And then maybe I'll sit next to Kevin, you know, like, but
That's fair. I had
they're all
garlic,
gonna sit
I had
next to
garlic
you.
for
They
lunch.
will,
So.
Yeah.
But you know, that's what people tend to do. They go to their little cliques and they never venture out. So if we don't break them out and make them break out of those little cliques to help network and stuff, break yourself out of your comfort zone, basically. So
It is very, very interesting of this knowledge, and you're going to say why, and I believe we are not teaching our technicians correctly. So I don't know if you've ever heard this story. I did not attend Phyllis Smith for all the old Isham people. You ever heard of Phyllis Smith? You had two ways to get certified through Isham. You would go to Chicago for 2 weeks, and if you didn't get a certain percentage on each day, you were kicked out, or you did the Purdue class. It was hands-on, it was book learning, and one of the books you had to have was Perkins. People don't even know who Perkins are. I see all these people talking about why are things this. You get Perkins' book and you read it, and you will get the basic understanding of sterile processing and sterilization and clean. These are scientific principles that do not change, and you use that for the foundation. But people, okay, I brush, that's all I want to do. Why do you brush? What is friction? What is fluid? I mean, what do you see as you go out there? How do we improve the education of our fellow professionals? How do we do it?
Well, I mean, I feel like that's a great question. I think there's some individuality to that. You know, people are different types of learners, but I do think, you know, when it comes to education, I think almost universally, you know, just listening to a lecture or something like that is something, or just reading a book is something. But if you can bring all of the elements together where you're, you know, you might present something, then maybe actually go right from there to doing that something, or going from there to watching it and then doing it, you know, and putting all the things together, the why, the rationale, all of those things, and then actually doing the kinetic part, doing, you know, and that was something that, you know, in my experience in the operating room was, you know, for better or for worse, you know, sometimes you feel like you're not necessarily prepared to go into the next case, but you have your person right there with you, and you do learn throughout the case, and it helps cement everything. And I don't know if we do that really with sterile processing as much as we should. You know, it's probably a little bit individual based on where you go or whatever, but
I think to your point with the operating concept, right, like, and what Steven's saying is like, it's the basics, right? Let's start with our basics and saying why. Why are you doing this? Why is this happening? Teach them that basic core. And then we can say, okay, now if you take that and you move to this facility, this might change, but now you understand the whys behind it. So if somebody's asking you to do the wrong thing, you have the forethought to say, wait a second, why am I doing it this way when it should be that way? And to your point, Kevin, it's like you going, you know, as a surgical tech, you going from one case to another surgeon. You know, you might be doing lap appies in every case, but every surgeon has a different way of doing it. So sometimes some things you're like, you know, and then, but sometimes, you know, it's just their own preference, whether they load their needles backwards or forwards, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so.
And I mean, Stefan made a good point with the understanding why behind everything that we do. I think when people make mistakes or they skip a step and they do it for a good reason, they want to go fast, they want to be able to turn things over for the next case. The intention is good, but they don't understand what could happen if things go bad.
Yeah.
You know, and they assume, well, the ultrasonic will do its job, the washer will do its job, so I don't need to do my job. But if you understand the way that manual cleaning works to get everything visible off, then everything else will do its job because you did that step, not in spite of you doing that step. So again, it's understanding that scientific background when it's crunch time and when you're about to make that wrong decision.
Go ahead.
yeah,
You go
definitely.
first, I'll come after you.
Yeah, I want to add, only because it just came to mind because this is something that I sometimes get flack for. But I do think one of the things that is missing going forward for our industry is the lack of formal education. Like
Yep.
the requirement here across the board is, with very few exceptions of 5 states, I think we talked about on the podcast, requiring certification. There's basically a requirement of high school diploma and GED other than those 5 states, and that to me is simply not enough. When you have a formalized higher education program, you get all of those things. You get the baseline science, you get the baseline why in a standardized way. And then even you typically get clinical hours with an educator, not somebody provided necessarily by the hospital. Like this is the provider comes from the school. And so you have a streamlined way of getting everybody up to that standard minimum competency.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, would do a lot in improving the industry going forward. Now, anybody who doesn't have formal education automatically balks at that, and I totally understand it, but I do believe that that is a stronger way forward for us.
I want to do on one thing. I know we're trying to keep it within a certain time frame, but I want to take what you said and make a different topic real quick. When you skip a step, people don't understand the consequences.
Yeah.
We do not teach, very rarely, the law and the consequences behind the risk management. I have sat through depositions. I don't know if any of you 3 have.
I have not.
But I have, and it's been with mistakes and errors. We do not do a good enough job of even the managers understanding the consequences if something doesn't happen. Many of these things are settled outside, the case is closed, nothing happens. And one of the best examples is TAS. If they didn't have people in Seattle going and bringing all the issues with what was happening with the eyes, we would have never known that. Most of those cases are settled out of court, sealed documents, and you never know there's an issue. And that happens in every institution. I don't care where you work. It's the little secret nobody wants to talk about. But the technician needs to know, if this doesn't happen, you're the surgical tech, you've worked in the OR, both of you circulated and worked. Certain things happen, patients die, they don't die, there's consequences or things that go wrong. And it comes back to you and you don't have your ducks in the row and you're a manager and you don't understand this. That has to be taught of the consequences of what really could happen. And we show it with the video with the electric shock, where they only see the 10% of the view, and if you don't check here, they're getting burns. The legal, we don't stress that enough. And I know I'm sort of going on, but that's what you said, the why.
Yeah.
You don't know the why, and this is a consequence.
Right.
And you've been in cases, you've seen things go, whoa, like, and so have you.
Oh, yeah.
But, so, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, to your point, like, I think we, in the sterile processing department, you don't hear what happens, right? Like,
not
so
enough.
to your point, that stuff gets settled and nobody knows what happens. I mean, it's rare as a surgical tech, I knew, unless I remembered a patient and said, oh, hey, Dr. So-and-so, whatever happened with that patient, right? We don't hear those follow-ups.
don't volunteer
We don't
that
know.
information.
No,
They
it's
don't,
not
they
like
don't.
they're like, oh, guess what? We had 5 lawsuits that we settled outside, I mean, but, so I think that's where there's a bit of a disconnect. And I think back to what we're talking about here, like the podcast, knowing things like that, having people come on and talk about their stories and their experiences, your experiences in the OR, Adam, your experiences in facilities, Stefan's, your experiences in,
Whatever.
all of your experience. And it all adds to the quality and the benefit of podcasts and being able to put that information out there in brief little summit tidbits for them to bite on, and okay, let's move forward with a further explanation and stuff.
So where you two guys want to go now? We've hit 100, and what are you
100 years?
No,
100 years.
100 episodes, which is great. Where are you two trying to take for the next 100? What you trying to do to sort of wrap this anniversary episode with our cake coming out?
I know.
Right now?
Yeah,
Waiting for
where's
this
the cake
cake.
anyway?
Yeah.
Did you order that? Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe next time.
No, I mean,
Maybe for
personally,
1,000.
Yeah, 4,000. No, I mean, I would love to be one of those podcasts that continues on, indefinitely. It's tough to always prioritize things like this for companies, and I get that. But I hope that we'll continue to provide value, obviously earn subscribers and listeners and things like that, but ultimately just to kind of, plant seeds for further educational growth, and whatever that means, because there's some things you just can't see into the future. I mean, the evolution of the industry kind of takes shape almost around surgery, as surgery evolves, then sterile processing must evolve, just like you see with the robotics entering surgery. Then all of a sudden our process got kind of turned on its head a little bit, and additional steps and all of this. Same with flexible endoscopes. So I guess what I would say, just going forward with the podcast, is just I hope that we can continue to bring value and bring experts to the table, whether they're internal or external, share collected experiences amongst people and share them all over the world. I mean, and just kind of help people out there think a little differently, be open-minded, be curious, be problem solvers, stop being stuck in an old frame of mind that nothing. I want to do it the same way forever and ever until the end. That's not what we should be doing, and so hopefully we can kind of plant those seeds along the way.
And I agree with everything you just said. I think that as the industry evolves, we're going to have to evolve too. And I mean, the Ask the Educator podcast is really about, as things change, we'll let you guys know. Hey, this is changing in the industry. Hey, AI is coming. We're going to have a lot of episodes coming about AI, I'm very certain. So I think that that's really what the podcast is. It's not set in one thing. It's always going to be changing and evolving, just like our industry changes. And I do want to say, for posterity, that I started about halfway through the podcast and we're at episode 65. I do want to say thank you to Kevin for calling me and giving me that opportunity to be the co-host here. And I know you were busy doing a lot of other things.
It's all good.
And so excited to be here with you and getting to do 100 with you. And,
Are you guys
and
gonna
both
hug?
of you.
Like,
It's
and
our
stuff?
bromance moment here. And to you guys,
Yes, sir.
and to you guys, thank you for being here on the 100th episode too. I think that, thank you for, you guys have been on quite a few of the Ask the Educator podcasts. If you like Malinda or Stefan, there are certainly more episodes with them coming. And I want to give a shout out to Amanda Maddock, who's behind the scenes right now. Yep. Amanda is the behind the scenes person for the podcast.
We see you. They can't see you, but we see you.
And again, just does everything for us. We just kind of show up and do our thing, and then we leave, and we let her take care of all the hard stuff.
We smile and wave.
So again, public shout out to Amanda Maddock for everything she does here at Healthmark.
Yep. Agree, 100%.
No, thanks.
You're one of the OGs too.
Yeah.
Speaking of AI, this is not really Stefan. This is a robot, Stefan.
Don't shut them down yet.
Anyways, well, thanks, guys. See you at 200, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, we'll see you at
Definitely at 200, but better before that, too.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for
Thanks-
having
thanks.
me
Yeah.
on. It's been
Thank you,
great.
everybody.
Remember, tell us what you want us to talk about. That's very important. Okay?
Yep. We love to
We
hear
love
from
to
it.
talk.
Yeah, we love to
We
talk.
do love
Yeah.
to talk.
Bye-bye.